So let's talk about slippers. And I know the rest of the world calls them flip-flops, but in Hawaii we call them slippers. And I've had the same slippers for probably about 2 to 3 years, but they're getting kind of worn down. And so instead of buying the same old brand that I always buy, I kind of wanted to explore different brands, try different brands, because I'm genuinely curious, what is the best Hawaii slipper? And I thought I'd bring you along as I try to figure this out. And when I talk about the perfect Hawaii slipper, like what does that mean? I mean primarily something that's versatile, because in Hawaii we wear slippers a lot. And so I need something that I can wear every single day in multiple conditions. And fashion is not really the top priority. It's more about it being comfortable. Can it handle like different surfaces like sidewalks and grass and sand, and like cost does play a role. And so I wanted to rate various slippers on these different things and just kind of see maybe what's the best Hawaii slipper for me. Hopefully you enjoy this as we go out and check out some of these slippers. So the first slipper is Locals. These are pretty much your classic go-to slipper in Hawaii. I think most people grew up with Locals. I definitely did. And for the longest time, this is pretty much what I wore. They're really flat, they're very cheap. Yeah, they can take quite a beating, and it's not that bad because you can always go out and buy another one. These are my Reefs. These are the incumbent. I've been wearing Reefs for the last at least 10 years, and they're very comfortable. These are the slippers that I first upgraded. Like when I was a kid, I only wore Locals, and then I got a pair of Reefs, and I thought, oh my gosh, I pretty much can't go back to the Locals. So these are the Scott slippers, and they are a local brand, so I like that. And they're also, from what I've heard, they have a really good reputation because they're very durable, and if you feel them, they're pretty solid. So I'm looking forward to trying these out. I've never worn Scott slippers before, so I think, yeah, I'm very curious on how they feel. These are Crocs. These are what I think is the X factor, because I'm pretty familiar with the normal Croc footwear slipper shoes, but I wanted to give these a try because I like the material that they're made from. I mean, they're very light, and so I want to give these a try and just see how good they feel. These are the Hoka ones. They're recovery slippers or flip-flops, and while not primarily made for your everyday use, I think they're made for like runners. I was very interested in the Hoka brand because, I also do some running, and I know that their shoes are very highly recommended. I thought I'd give them a try, mostly out of curiosity. They have this super thick, like bottom, which I think is very interesting as a design. All right, and these are the OluKai, and they have a pretty big online and social media presence. And I was just very curious because these are clearly out of the price range of all of these other slippers. And I typically wouldn't spend a lot of money on slippers. And with these slippers, I really wanted to see if I could feel the quality difference. Like, does the money actually make a difference? So we're here at Magic Island, and I thought this would be the best place to test this slipper for the things that I'm looking for. Again, I'm looking for versatility here. So we have a sidewalk over here, and then it transitions to like kind of a grassy area, and then it's dry sand, and then it's wet sand, and then it's the water. So I think that's a good test for all these different types of ground conditions, I guess you could say. And yeah, we're gonna run all these slippers through that. Okay, so this is actually filmed several days later, like after I filmed all that stuff at Magic Island. And I realized that there's a lot of issues with my methodology in testing out the slippers on that particular day. The biggest thing was that it was more like a first impressions. It wasn't like a better long-term review. And of course, the only way you can do a long-term review is to test these out for months. But I actually took them all out and I used them in my like every day, and I took notes about what I experienced. And I think that's a better reflection on the slippers themselves. So I want to talk about each slipper from the cheapest to the most expensive, and then after that give my kind of final verdict, like which ones would I recommend and which ones I'm actually going to be using in the everyday. Okay, so the first one is the local slipper. Again, these are your classic slippers. What I really like about them is that they're pretty comfortable, especially if you grew up here in Hawaii. Like, they're comfortable in the sense that you've worn them probably your whole life. So although they don't provide like a lot of support because they're so flat, like they're just like comfortable because they're familiar. And of course the price. On sale, these are $3. Regular price are like $5, and you can buy them you know, at longs or something like that. Now, some of the disadvantages of this, it's not very comfortable longer distances. Typically I'll walk like 15 or 20 minutes, like if I go to the mall or something, and after a while my feet start to get sore. Another thing is durability. Remember when we were like little kids, we would have to, like, when you try to fix it, you would slide the t-shirt in and you would pull it out and you try to fix it that way. But of course, they're so cheap that you just go out and buy another one. That's part of their charm. The next one are the Reef slippers. I've been wearing Reefs pretty much since before college, and the biggest drawback to me is how comfortable they are, and not just because I'm familiar with them, but they actually feel very comfortable. It fits my foot really well. I can walk long distances in this 20-30 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes. I don't know if I'd want to walk more than that. I do like that they can get wet, although the previous version of the slipper that I got, when it got wet, it would soak in the water and it would like kind of like stink. It couldn't really dry it off very well. This one, on the other hand, I think it's meant to actually get wet, so the water doesn't soak in as badly and it doesn't have like that really bad smell. And for $25, I actually think this is a pretty great deal. But one of the drawbacks on this is when it does get wet, and this may apply to all the other slippers, but I know this one in particular for sure when it comes to Reef, is when it gets wet or you start walking on a very slippery surface, these have tended to slide for me quite a bit. But overall for me, it's really hard to beat these just because I'm so familiar with the feel of them. They're pretty cheap and yeah, just overall really good. All right, these are the Scott ones, and this is the one I'm probably the most curious on that I'm going to continue to use, and I hope to find new things about it. Price, $25. Pretty affordable. If you go online, they're a lot more expensive. I think they're about $40, but locally here you can go to like Walmart or regular slipper stores. They're pretty cheap, which is great because it's a Hawaii product. Another great thing is I guess the construction of the slipper. Again, I'm not a footwear expert, but these are very like, it just seemed like very durable. It's very heavy rubber, which again can be a drawback, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I do like the fact that these are pretty hard. And by the way, if you're gonna smash like a bug, like a cockroach with this thing, it's not gonna survive. This thing is solid. There is some support on the inside. My brother actually found it to be a little bit obtrusive. It was like a bit much for him. I don't really mind. I would say the biggest drawback of this slipper is the weight. These things are noticeably heavy, and I think in the long distance walking, I could start to kind of feel that. Again, like, you're trying to get something that's rugged and something that'll hopefully last long, and I feel like these will last a long time. But especially when I compare them to the Reef slippers, these are a lot heavier. And when I think about times when I go to the beach, especially as I'm walking in the sand, I know some people don't walk in the sand with their slippers, but I tend to walk in the sand with my slippers. So for my needs, these just make it a little bit harder to do. Okay, so let's talk about these Crocs. The first thing, at $25, these will not break your bank. These are relatively cheap. I think the biggest thing it has going for it is the material and how light it is, again, in contrast to the Scott. These are so light. I mean, maybe they're not as light as the locals, but for like the form factor, these are very light. Really, when it came down to the drawbacks, it was just the fitting. Like, for some reason, on the inside of my foot, like this one strap just rubbed against my foot the wrong way. And as I was walking, like we walked, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. By the time I was done, I had to take these off. And fortunately, I brought other slippers with me to test. But I just could not wear these anymore because they were, I don't know what it was, but it just rubbed my foot the wrong way. For me, it wasn't very comfortable. It's probably one of the slippers I'm not gonna wear anymore. Now let's talk about these Hoka ones. I have a lot to say about these. These were a curiosity. I know that it's hard to compare them with the other slippers because these are a recovery slipper for runners, for people that have certain foot problems, but I wanted to just give it a try, mostly because of the design. It's very unusual, it's very thick on the back, and I just wanted to see how it was. So some of the good things about this slipper, I thought it was fairly comfortable when standing. You know, like if I'm standing around or walking very short distances, I'm not really moving, like this was very comfortable to have this little extra bump in the back. I thought it was good. It does give you a little extra boost in height, which again in Hawaii is appreciated. The price at $50, I mean, it's kind of expensive. Again, I paid it because I wanted to just know how it would feel. And Hoka in general, some of the shoes are pretty expensive, but $50, kind of a lot. Now, just a couple of the drawbacks. The first thing is the fitting. When I put my foot into the slipper and I slide it in, the length, it fits my foot perfectly. Like I'm a size 9. But the problem is these little straps, they go too high. Like they need to like lower them down. So that's why I don't know if there's like a way to adjust this, but it's too high, especially because it curves so much. So what the result of that is it doesn't fit very tightly on your foot. And when I was walking, again, long distances or just walking every day, it doesn't feel very secure. And I think that's really the big problem. If it was a little bit tighter on my foot, it may be okay. And that may, again, be just a sizing issue. But my foot fits this. That's the thing. It's just not thick enough. And I guess my foot is like skinny on the top. Again, I wouldn't say these are bad. They might help a lot of people if you have certain foot injuries. But for me, I just don't see myself wearing this all that much. So now we talk about the OluKai. And this was, again, kind of a interesting comparison because this one is so much more expensive than the other one. So to compare them, I'm not exactly sure how fair that is, but again, I wanted to see the difference between like a normal slippers I probably would buy that are in my price range, versus one I would never regularly look at because I just wanted to see and feel how it felt to wear like a good quality slipper. And some of the pros that I noticed with this one. The first thing is it's comfortable. Like because it has leather on the top, it just feels really great. Like after living in Hawaii and using like rubber slippers, trying on something like this, it just feels good to walk around in, to stand around in. It just feels nice. Like I was saying this like when I was walking around at the beach, like I can't believe how good it feels. I do like the fact that the bottom has these little like rubbery things that stick out so that it grips pretty well because again, when you're walking in water, like slippery surfaces, you want to make sure that you're not slipping around because you're gonna hurt yourself. The weight feels pretty solid, somewhat on the heavy side in terms of a slipper, but kind of what you would expect. I don't feel like they're heavier than the Scott slippers. I haven't weighed them, but they just don't feel as heavy. But the biggest pro, and it's kind of hard to talk about this because, yeah, it's just hard to talk about it. The biggest pro I felt when wearing these slippers, because they get you from point A to point B, right? They're just slippers, like a car, right? It gets you there. But the biggest pro was when I put these on, I just felt better about myself. And I know that sounds, it sounds so, hearing myself say that, it sounds like so shallow, you know, like, oh my gosh. Because it fits so well, I felt good about myself wearing these slippers. It's hard to explain, like, and I don't know if it's because I know how much they cost, and I'm sure that's a psychological factor in wearing these, but when I wore these slippers, I just felt better about myself. I don't know if that's worth the cost of what these are. Yeah, I just felt better about myself. And I'm sure that's gonna fade over time. So it's not something I expect to experience all the time. But I will say that in trying these on, I just felt good. And sometimes I think it's okay to feel good. And maybe that's why people like to wear certain brands. I'm not really a brand person, but when I wore these, because it felt so good, I felt good about myself. And I don't know, can you put a price on that? Well, of course you can. You can put a price on that. These are $95, and that's pretty pricey for a slipper. But at this price, I think that's a question that people will have to ask themselves. Is that something that you're willing to buy? It's not really an investment because these slippers make you no money. But it's like, are you willing to put down the money for a good quality that, again, for me, made me feel better about myself? I felt good wearing these. And so is it worth it? And that's going to be different for everyone. And you're going to have to ask yourself, is that something I'm willing to pay for? And another drawback that may seem silly, but I do want to mention it, is because of how nice and expensive these are, relatively speaking, I'm less likely to want to wear these, particularly at the beach, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of buying a slipper. And let me explain. I would never bring these slippers to the beach and then leave them on the beach and go swimming. Or I would never leave them at the pool to go jump in the pool and expect them to be back. Like, I would worry about them so much that it would just kind of ruin my experience. And I think that's something to also factor in. And it's one of those things where I don't want the item to own me. I want to own the item, but I don't want it to own me. And I feel like that's one of the drawbacks anytime you buy something that is relatively expensive, like that item or that car or that bag, you're almost afraid to use it. And I have to like remind myself, like, you know what? No, this is a slipper. It's gonna get worn out. It's gonna get busted eventually. You're gonna step on things. It's gonna get dirty. Just enjoy it while you can. Okay, so final verdict. Which ones am I going to be using in my daily life? And it was hard to pick just the one. I ended up picking 3, but I want to talk about why and how I think I'd use each slipper. And I think it's okay to have multiple slippers, especially, again, in Hawaii, because this is our footwear of choice. So the locals are definitely going to be a go-to slipper for me. I can just say that because they're so cheap and just, I don't have to worry about them. If I'm going to the beach, I'm bringing these. I'm not bringing any other slipper because I don't want to have to worry about anyone taking these. You know, at $3 to $5, no big deal. These will get me from the car to the sand, and if I go in the water, that's fine. But this will just get me to where I need to go. Probably won't be wearing these every day, but I think these are great to have. Just a junk bus-up slipper that you can even leave in the car so that you can just use and not have to worry about it. The second slipper is the Reef. It is so hard to get away from these because I like them. They're comfortable, I'm familiar with them. They just feel good. I know that it's only $25, so if they get bust up, I step on something bad, I really don't have to worry about them. And I've been walking in Reefs like here in Hawaii for a long time, so I know that they can handle all the things that I'm gonna encounter. And yeah, I really like this slipper. And the third one is the OluKai. And like I said, these slippers make me feel good about myself. I don't know what it is. None of the other ones do. There are some concerns, again, about like, if I go to the beach, I would not bring these because I don't want someone to steal them. And unfortunately, that's the reality of sometimes going to the beach, right? You have to worry about your stuff. So I don't want to have to worry about these. However, for everyday use, I think these will be the slippers that I'm going to use, minus the beach. And again, that feeling of the slippers making me feel good, it's probably going to fade. And I accept that. I accept that. It's going to probably fade. Just the fact that I have a nice pair, I think it's well worth it. Especially, again, I walk around a lot. I'm a local. I wear slippers almost every day. Pretty much every day except for work. And so I think it's nice to have a good quality slipper and one that, yeah, I particularly enjoy. Okay, so that's my review on all of these different slippers. If you have any other recommendations on good slippers or maybe slippers that you might want to recommend, please let me know in the comments below. I am very curious. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and aloha.